The British Museum holds a small cylindrical clay seal, catalog number 113205. It was found near the ancient shoreline of the Persian Gulf and fits easily in the palm of one's hand. Its surface is carved with microscopically precise lines depicting the structure of a ziggurat and a figure emerging from the water. You can clearly see the layers of the monumental building extending deep into the ground below the depicted water level. This small object represents a very specific depiction of a foundation that extends far beneath the visible surface. The seal dates from a period long before, according to our general understanding, complex architectural planning emerged. Its physical presence in London compels us to look at the physical reality of the places it describes in such detail. I looked at it for a long time before allowing myself to ask the obvious question: if ancient craftsmen drew underground foundations with such striking precision, did they actually build them in reality? The answer to this question may be buried right now under a massive layer of sand in southern Iraq. But this neat chronological story comes to an abrupt halt at the 17th layer. The two lowest layers, the very ones that hold the absolute beginning of this first city, have never been excavated. Official archaeological work was halted there in 1949, and since then, no one has gone deeper than that point. This means that the true foundation of the world's first city is still hidden deep in the mud and sand. We are trying to analyze humanity's most important book, in which the first and most crucial pages are firmly glued together. All you can do is objectively speculate about what exactly lies in these unexplored lowest layers. The desert surrounding Eridu stretches for many miles, guarding ancient secrets beneath millions of pounds of compacted sand. Every time a new technological tool is developed, we look everywhere but at the very point of origin of urban life. Surface artifacts are meticulously cataloged, placed in glass display cases, and proudly exhibited to the public in world capitals. But the very heart of the oldest settlement remains as inaccessible today as it was over a century ago. This is not at all a situation where a historical site has been lost, or its exact location is the subject of academic debate. We know where the first city is located, right down to specific geographic coordinates on a modern satellite map. We know that the temple's structure extends downward, far beyond the levels of known and documented history. The people who built it left us detailed records of their complex construction methods and precise measurements. They clearly wanted future generations to know the true scale of their unprecedented engineering feat. The question is not whether there is more to be found in the sands of Eridu. The question is why we have collectively decided to stop looking at the very beginning of our own timeline. The physical evidence clearly points to massive, deliberate construction efforts that we have only partially uncovered. We have modern tools to look deeper, and we have ancient texts that point us directly there. And yet, the lower layers remain untouched, lying silently beneath the scorching Iraqi sun year after year. The official academic explanation for why the excavations stopped permanently at the 17th layer boils down to a simple lack of funds. It is claimed that the 1949 expedition simply did not have enough of its allocated budget to continue the deep and complex work. This interpretation is plausible, as the difficult logistics in the desert require enormous expenditures on water, manual labor, and transportation. Any archaeological excavation is an extremely costly process that relies entirely on grants and private donations. During the difficult post-war period, funding for basic science was indeed severely limited worldwide. Scientists also quite rightly point out that the groundwater level in the region could have been a serious problem. Digging a safe trench through wet, unstable layers of mud is technically extremely difficult without heavy modern equipment. They argue that preserving the already excavated upper layers was far more important than the risk of the trench walls collapsing. From the perspective of conservative field archaeology, it is better to leave deep layers undisturbed than to destroy them through rough intervention. This is a measured and extremely cautious approach that has been successfully applied for decades at many other ancient sites. Furthermore, it is believed that the bottom 2 layers of Eridu contain only scattered remains of primitive reed huts. This established theory suggests that before the large-scale brick temples were built, simple temporary shelters of the first settlers stood here. Researchers have logically concluded that these hypothetical huts will not provide new information about the development of monumental architecture. Within the paradigm of gradual evolutionary development from simple to complex, this conclusion appears entirely consistent. Why spend millions of dollars excavating ancient straw when we already have massive ziggurats right on the surface? Most importantly, the assumption about reed huts is not based on any real physical evidence at all. None of the living scientists have seen these 2 layers, so the claim about their primitiveness is simply a convenient guess. Scientists simply extrapolated data from other regions, assuming in advance that Eridu must necessarily be the same. This explanation is consistent. It is also applied universally, as a way to never ask whether a claim is true. We have created a convenient theory about what exactly is there, and we use it as the main reason not to verify the facts with a shovel. Let's look at one specific location where the official version reveals its most serious logical flaw. Directly beneath the unexcavated section of Enki's temple, covering an area of about 2 acres, the ground should not contain any major structural anomalies. If this is truly just the birthplace of a simple settlement, the soil should be relatively homogeneous all the way down to bedrock. We should expect a gradual and smooth decrease in the density of findings as we dig deeper into the mud and sand. But data from physical instruments paint a completely different picture, one that is systematically ignored in official academic reports. Official science is directly asking us to believe that the most important site in history is not worth the additional financial investment. We are being asked to calmly accept that 80% of the area of the first city simply does not deserve our attention. We are encouraged to look closely at 17 layers and completely ignore the massive foundation upon which they stand. This is very much like reading an encyclopedia of humanity in which someone has deliberately torn out the very first pages, and we are persistently assured that nothing truly important was written on those torn-out pages. The official version demands that we show a complete and unconditional lack of curiosity about our own origins. It erects an artificial barrier of outdated logistical constraints between us and real physical history. We are dealing with a unique place where the very concept of urban planning was first formed. To leave it unexplored due to an alleged lack of funds in the developed 21st century is simply not an answer. It is a conscious choice not to look where facts that are extremely inconvenient for the system might be hidden. In the archives of the University of Pennsylvania, among hundreds of dusty folders, lie the original field notes from the 1949 excavations. These are detailed daily reports compiled by archaeologists Seton Lloyd and Fuad Safar, right on the site of Eridu itself. On the yellowed pages, every inch of the trench and every fragment of ancient pottery found is recorded in neat handwriting. The documents dryly describe the moment when the workers reached the 17th layer of the temple complex and stumbled upon something unexpected. The records clearly indicate a sudden change in soil composition, which required an immediate and complete halt to the work. Official academia regards these notes as a standard record of a completely routine archaeological process. Scholars reasonably trust these reports, as Lloyd was an outstanding and meticulous specialist of his time. His decision to halt deep excavations is considered to have been dictated solely by the objective difficulties of fieldwork in the desert. Ensuring the safety of hired workers must always be an absolute priority in any research expedition. This position is logical and fully consistent with the strict safety protocols of the mid-20th century. You can vividly imagine these people standing in a deep trench under the scorching Middle Eastern sun. They looked down at the smooth brickwork, which stretched monolithically into complete obscurity. They were acutely aware that they were standing on the solid roof of something far more ancient and monumental. However, the very next day after this important record was made, work in that sector was halted forever. The trench was quickly filled with sand, and that particular area was never disturbed by steel shovels again. The entire modern chronology of Eridu is based on a single assumption, that there is nothing significant beneath this layer. But the original notes of the very people who physically dug this ground directly contradict that assumption. They literally left us a precise map pointing directly to a hidden architectural structure of enormous size. This structure lies right beneath our feet, waiting for someone to decide to check the old, yellowed records. And yet, not a single modern university has sent an expedition to verify this specific deep platform. If this platform exists, it instantly pushes the dating of monumental construction back thousands of years. It proves that the first inhabitants of Eridu did not learn to build gradually from local clay and reeds. They arrived at this empty site with a ready-made, advanced understanding of engineering and structural architecture. A massive foundation of unknown depth requires complex preliminary calculations and proper load distribution. This is a level of urban planning that we usually associate with much later historical eras. These notes are not classified government documents. They are fully accessible to any researcher in the archives. Anyone can open the relevant folder and read Seton Lloyd's words with their own eyes. The problem lies not in access to information, but in the academic community's willingness to ask the right questions. We prefer to collectively ignore this paragraph in the report because it shatters the entire established chronological model. It is much easier to believe in primitive huts than in a massive underground complex of unknown purpose. The original field journals continue to lie quietly in Pennsylvania, bearing witness to unfinished work. They constitute direct paper evidence that the history of Eridu is hopelessly incomplete. We deliberately stopped right where the most interesting and technically complex parts began. That very foundation of unknown depth is still there, securely locked in the dry soil of Iraq. We close this book on the most intriguing sentence and collectively refuse to turn the page. The digital archives of geological institutes store the results of remote sensing of our planet's surface. In 2002, modern satellite systems and ground-based ground-penetrating radar scanned the territory of ancient Eridu in detail. This raw data, presented as complex color maps, is physically accessible on the servers of major research centers. It accurately shows soil density and reveals large voids or dense structures beneath the sand. These scans clearly show massive geometric anomalies directly beneath the unexcavated section of the city. Official geological science interprets these radar spots as natural formations or pockets of groundwater. Scientists reasonably defend this position, citing the extremely complex hydrology of this particular region. The rivers of Mesopotamia have changed their courses over the centuries, leaving dense layers of compressed clay and silt underground. Natural processes often create formations that, from a distance, may appear to be man-made structures. This academic caution is entirely justified to avoid jumping to conclusions about every dark spot on the radar screen. But this natural explanation completely falls apart when we begin to mathematically analyze the shape of these anomalies. blind geological process extremely rarely create perfect right angles over an area of several acres. The radar recorded distinct rectangular contours that are strictly parallel to the walls of known temples on the surface. Nature does not build foundations with perfect structural symmetry tens of feet underground. The width of these geometric anomalies is measured in hundreds of feet, and they have crystal-clear boundaries. You must clearly understand that ground-penetrating radar does not produce pretty pictures. It measures the physical density of the medium. For the radio signal to reflect in this way, there must be solid rock or dense fired brick beneath the sand. The total volume of material required to create such a radar signature is estimated at many thousands of tons. Someone had to bring all that material there, level the site, and build this structure. And all of this happened during the very era that we condescendingly consider the primitive dawn of humanity. If we fully accept the official version, we will have to believe in a massive statistical coincidence. We must believe that nature accidentally created perfect rectangles right beneath the oldest city. Moreover, it arranged these rectangles strictly parallel to the later structures built by the Sumerians themselves. The statistical probability of such a geological miracle approaches absolute mathematical zero. Radar data clearly shows what we stubbornly refuse to dig up with steel shovels. These satellite images have been publicly available for over 2 decades without arousing any academic interest. Not a single large-scale archaeological expedition has been organized to verify these specific identified coordinates. We have in our hands a precise treasure map, printed using lasers and space satellites. But instead of digging directly according to this map, we prefer to endlessly argue about pottery on the surface. We clearly see the outlines of a massive building, but we consciously refuse to open the door to it. The data files from this ground-penetrating radar continue to be securely stored on the hard drives of geological institutes. They constitute irrefutable mathematical proof that a massive structure lies beneath the sand. These are not wild conspiracy theories. They are data from precise physical instruments measuring the density of the Earth. Anomalies of non-geological origin have been clearly documented and localized in space, and they are located at the most important and ancient archaeological site on our entire planet. In the Louvre, in the Department of Near Eastern Antiquities, there is a small Sumerian clay tablet on display. It is well known among specialists as the tablet with the temple plan and was found near Eridu. Its flat surface is imprinted with precise geometric lines forming the plan of a complex architectural structure. Next to these straight lines are cuneiform symbols indicating the exact dimensions of each wall and each room. This physical artifact represents one of the oldest engineering drawings in human history. Official academic science regards this tablet as an abstract plan or an idealized drawing of a temple. Historians reasonably believe that the Sumerians often recorded mythological or purely symbolic dimensions of sacred buildings. In many ancient texts that have been found, large numbers had a sacred rather than a literal engineering meaning. Therefore, interpreting this data as a religious metaphor makes sense in the context of their complex culture. This position is logical and helps to easily explain why some buildings in the texts seem unrealistically large. But this convenient interpretation becomes completely untenable when we examine the mathematics underlying this drawing. This tablet uses the precise unit of measurement, ninda, which is approximately 19.7 feet in length. The dimensions indicated on the ancient clay are not round sacred numbers like 7 or 12. These are mathematically complex fractions and precise engineering proportions that are critically necessary for actual construction. An abstract mythological temple in the heavens has absolutely no need for precise tolerances on the thickness of load-bearing brick walls. Official historians often ignore these precise figures, dismissing them as poetic exaggeration. But why would a rational ancient scribe use complex fractions to describe a simple fantasy? The mathematical precision of this tablet directly indicates that it was a working document for actual builders. It was created precisely so that someone could take it and bring a grand project to life. And this detailed project included the creation of a massive underground space, which the text refers to. The dimensions on this tablet coincide in the strangest way with the dimensions of the anomalies found by ground-penetrating radar. If we superimpose the ancient drawing from the Louvre onto the radar images from Eridu, the proportions match with frightening precision. We have an ancient text describing a massive foundation deep underground and a modern device showing something similar. Both of these independent pieces of evidence point to the same physical reality hidden beneath the sands of Iraq. Yet we continue to stubbornly view them in isolation, refusing to connect these obvious dots. These precise measurements in Ninda units shatter our basic understanding of the capabilities of early civilizations. They irrefutably prove that planning preceded large-scale construction, not the other way around. The first city of Eridu did not grow chaotically out of a cluster of reed huts, as textbooks try to convince us. It was professionally designed from the very beginning, using standardized units of length and complex calculations. And a significant part of this grand plan was deliberately hidden underground, out of sight. This tablet with the plan still lies quietly on its shelf in a glass display case at the Louvre. Any visitor to this museum can walk up and look at these precise lines and exact calculations. It reliably preserves the dimensions of a structure that is still waiting to be unearthed by archaeologists. The exact figures are documented, the ancient units of Ninda have been translated, and the depth is clearly indicated in the text. All that remains for us is to fully trust what is written and finally begin digging to the specified depth. The Museum of the Ancient Near East in Berlin houses a large fragment of a basalt stele found in southern Mesopotamia. This heavy black stone is densely inscribed with text describing the deeds of the god Enki in his city of Eridu. The surface of this stone has been polished by time, but the cuneiform characters are carved so deeply that they are still easily legible today. The text does not describe typical battles or conquests at all. It focuses on the process of founding the very first settlement. This physical object contains the oldest written mention of what exactly lies beneath the city. Mainstream scholarship views this ancient text as part of a standard mythological epic about the creation of the world. Scholars rightly argue that many ancient cultures often attributed the creation of their first cities to the gods. Invoking the highest divine authority effectively legitimized the power of rulers and priests in the eyes of the populace. Interpreting these ancient texts as purely religious allegories is an entirely correct and safe academic approach. This position is logical and protects historians from taking every ancient, colorful myth literally. But this standard interpretation breaks down completely when the text shifts from mystical abstractions to physical characteristics. The basalt stele does not describe an abstract kingdom in the heavens. It describes a specific construction site. It explicitly mentions the use of heavy stone blocks bound with bitumen and precise waterproofing techniques. Religious myths typically do not go into any detail about how to properly mix mortar. These technical details clearly indicate that the text is based on recollections of a real engineering project. The idea of large-scale underground construction makes a great deal of practical sense in the harsh climate of southern Iraq, where surface temperatures often exceed 110 degrees Fahrenheit. It is always comfortable and cool underground. Constant access to fresh water deep beneath the sand was a matter of survival for this first city. Building a reliable structure extending down to the underground aquifers would have been a truly ingenious engineering solution. But acknowledging this fact means acknowledging that the founders of Eridu were brilliant engineers. We are accustomed to thinking of the very first humans as primitive farmers, molding uneven pots from river mud. The Berlin Stele powerfully challenges this image by describing large-scale and complex underground works. To build something underground requires extremely complex logistics for excavating soil and a system of underground ventilation. This requires a deep understanding of hydrostatic pressure to prevent groundwater from flooding the completed chambers. The text explicitly states that they successfully accomplished this task during the construction of their Eabzu. The basalt stele describing Eabzu is on permanent display at the Museum of the Ancient Near East in Berlin. It weighs hundreds of pounds and represents an absolutely indisputable piece of the physical reality of our past. The words carved on it have long been translated and are available for study by any interested researcher. They explicitly describe the complex structure extending underground beneath the very first city on our planet. This ancient engineering report continues to patiently await its practical and independent confirmation. Let's gather all these scattered fragments of information into a single, coherent, and very clear picture. We are dealing with the oldest known city on the planet, which has been only partially excavated. We have a vast amount of data from completely different sources that converge at a single specific point. Each individual fact can be explained away or dismissed, but together they create an absolutely undeniable pattern. And this pattern clearly points to a massive, deliberate concealment of architectural information beneath the sands of Eridu. All of these independent clues point strictly in the same direction. They tell us that the history of Eridu does not begin with primitive reed huts on the surface. It begins with a massive, deeply buried foundation that was designed with absolute mathematical precision. And this cyclopean foundation is still there, waiting for us to decide to take a look at it. We have surrounded ourselves with evidence, yet we categorically refuse to take that final, practical step. You can see how quickly this wall of evidence is forming, challenging our understanding of history. We are not dealing with guesswork or conspiracy theories. We are looking at real physical objects. These are field reports, radar scans, clay tablets, and stone stelae, safely stored in archives. The problem lies in the choice: to classify all this as coincidence or to acknowledge the existence of a system. And the choice to classify everything before conducting an investigation is the least scientific approach of all possible ones. The picture is crystal clear, and all the pieces of this puzzle fit together perfectly. Precise measurements, radar anomalies, and ancient texts describe the same underground reality. The question is no longer whether there is evidence. It is literally right before our eyes. The question is how much longer we will pretend not to notice anything. The accumulation of these facts has reached the very point where ignoring them becomes simply impossible. Let's return to that very small clay seal in the halls of the British Museum, the very one that lies quietly on red velvet under catalog number 113205. Carved into it with microscopic lines is a ziggurat whose layers clearly extend deep beneath the water and the earth. We started with this small object, which fits in the palm of your hand, and have come a long way. This journey has led us to the realization that the ancient engravers did not invent anything for the sake of beauty. They depicted as accurately as possible the physical reality they saw with their own eyes. They knew exactly about the massive foundation extending 140 feet deep into the damp earth. They knew about the grand project of Eabzu, which was hidden beneath the visible part of the city of Eridu. And they left us this seal as visual proof of their monumental engineering achievements. A small piece of fired clay turned out to be the most accurate map of any in the world. Official science looks at this and sees primitive art depicting the mythological fantasies of early humans. I look and see an accurate architectural cross-section of a monumental underground structure. Perhaps this is a far-fetched conclusion based on the interpretation of a few ancient lines. Perhaps this is exactly what it looks like. The truth still lies there, beneath millions of heavy pounds of sand. This whole story clearly shows how easy it is to halt the search for true scientific truth. The problem lies not in abstract science, but in conservative institutional bureaucracy. The system operates through one specific decision: the choice to classify before investigating. But facts have a way of coming to the surface, even if they're buried 140 feet deep. And modern radar technology is making this artificial concealment an increasingly difficult process. Think about the people who physically built this massive foundation 1,000 years ago. They put in a colossal amount of manual labor, hoping that their work would stand the test of time. They left us instructions, plans, and seals, hoping that we would one day understand their message. We have successfully deciphered their language, but we have categorically refused to believe in the reality of their achievements. We have betrayed their memory by simply dismissing their greatest engineering project as a beautiful myth. But it is not too late to change this approach and resume excavations at this site. We have ground-penetrating radar, powerful pumps, and the engineering expertise to safely excavate these layers. We simply need the collective will to ask the right questions and fund an expedition to Eridu. We must permanently open those very pages of the book of human history that have been glued shut. Only then will we be able to truly understand who we are and where we came from. This story is not about a conspiracy. It is about the inertia of human thought and a deep fear of change. It is much easier to defend old theories than to build new ones based on unpredictable findings. But a true researcher must go where the facts lead, no matter how inconvenient it may be. And these facts clearly indicate that something colossal lies beneath the sands of southern Iraq, biding its time. The question remains entirely open to anyone willing to think independently and critically. This whole story began with a tiny artifact that easily fits in the palm of your hand. Radar images of rectangular anomalies are stored on the servers of geological institutes. A clay tablet with calculations in nindas physically exists in the halls of the Louvre. Cethon Lloyd's records have been in the archives of the University of Pennsylvania since 1949. The original cylindrical seal, number 113205, is currently resting on velvet in the British Museum.